Back Row Ministry, the world premiere. Mr. Mahdi coming back at you live and direct. Kind of took a break on Trumpism. We'll begin to cover the Stratego game that's being played as everybody kind of positions himself for World War III. As we said, we're deep into World War III. Um, Reminder again, I got to do this summer. I got to go out looking for farms in Jersey. We want to find alternative food sources, places where we can get provisions for a good price. People are willing to trade, so definitely find some things that you're good at as far as for trade, because you're going to have to use those things as we move closer to World War III. So anything that you know is a tradable item or a tradable service, definitely think about that as we get closer to this. But find your provisions. If you garden, that's good. If you don't, you want to find those farms that, collard greens, string beans, those type of provisions are plentiful. So we can survive this period. And it's plenty of deer in a lot of these places. So get up with your neighborhood hunters, because that's where you're going to buy your meat. You got to eat what you can to survive. All that vegan stuff, I'm sorry for the vegans. You better be growing you some vegetables and peas and things like that, because you're going to need them. So we just want to be prepared as we get closer to the actual event. Like I said, we're moving up to World War III as far as the actual event. We had tariff wars. Tariff wars is in play. All that's a part of World War III. We got picking sides between Russia and Ukraine. We see that little game. We see the restructuring of the government moving forward. So these things all play, and we see the New World Order shifting again. So after the death of the Pope, the Israeli situation will come back up to the top as we talk about building the New Jerusalem. So just prepare for these things. So definitely want to talk about, or I want to talk about just a quick side um, item to kind of take me away from Trumpism is the movie Sinners. So a lot of people have seen the movie Sinners. Of course, it stars Michael B. Jordan, Ryan Coogler, who directed Michael B. Jordan in Fruitvale Station, a movie I really didn't watch. Um, Directs Michael B. Jordan again. And, over the years, I struggle with Michael B. Jordan because I always remember him as Wallace from The Wire. He's Wallace from The Wire. He always will be to me. But, over the years, I've kind of given him a chance as an actor, and he's kind of showed me some different things. And he's beginning to shine as an actor. And this movie really shows his growth and development as an actor. It really shows his growth and development as an actor, the person who definitely can hold it down. The action piece, he's done a good job in several of the movies where he's taken that role. And, this is one of those showcases where, he's there with Delroy Lindo. He's able to shine. He's got some other strong actors around him. There's a young man who plays the lead. Pretty much, he's the lead in this. He's a young up and coming, well, hoping to be an up and coming musician. That was his first acting job, so he did a pretty good job in that as well. So Sinners is based in the South, and you see a lot of things that we talk about as far as Black American history, foundational Black American history. When we talk about Native American, our Native American ties to those tribes, and you see the Choctaws in that part of Mississippi. So my family comes from that part of Mississippi: Clarksdale, Shelby, Gator, that part of the Delta, what we call Bullock County. So all of them, my family was from there. So that's Choctaw land. So a lot of the natives in that region, from Tupelo, down where the casinos are, those are Choctaws. And the native Choctaws who've returned to that land and built casinos out there do not put money back into old Choctaw lands. You got to remember, all those Native Americans that's in Oklahoma, those are displaced people. They are displaced people. They're not from Oklahoma. And most of them do not like being in Oklahoma. So they started to return to native lands: Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee. That's why you get these big gambling casino deals in some of these places, because these are Native American lands. But they don't give credit or claim the people who are in those lands, which are descendants of the tribe. So, and you see in the movie, the Choctaws were still there, meaning that all of them didn't get pushed to Oklahoma. They did stay in the South. So when we talk about the Dawes Rolls and some of the Native Americans asked, or some of the tribes, the Cherokee, Choctaw, and they ask you, well, where are your people on the Dawes Rolls? And I told one lady no, because my family didn't leave. They didn't flee. They didn't take off. They were able to kind of blend in with everybody else, because most Native Americans were dark-skinned people before they got dummied down. So it was easy for them to blend in. So my great great grandmother, she comes from a different part of Mississippi, and in that part and region they were Cherokees, and her mother was a Cherokee, and pretty much my grandmother is fully Cherokee. If you saw my great grandmother, she is a Cherokee woman, beautiful hair, her face always turned red, and the term red skin, they took that term to um, mean something racial. They took that term to mean something racial. There's a reason why they removed the Redskins from Washington. It had nothing to do with they felt a certain kind of way or they felt labeled. They removed that because they did not want people to remember what real Native Americans look like. That's why they removed the red skin. It had nothing to do with people getting scalped in blood. They had red skin because most Native Americans of color, their complexion changes a deep red in the summer. It's a beautiful thing. And my great grandma, that's how her complexion would change. But I like that he kind of touched on all Native Americans, Choctaws, Cherokee. They did not flee their homeland of the South. They stayed right there. It's the fleers in Oklahoma and these other spots that were the fleers. So my family stayed put. But I like that he kind of added that. So Center's got has a lot of spin. They do a lot with the blues. The blues pretty much was built there in the Delta, in the Mississippi Delta, and that's where it really picked up steam. And all forms of Black American music came from the blues, came from the South. The South kind of cultivated other cultures. So as we brought those cultures out of the South, you got to remember, the South and the East pretty much were the main colonies. That's where the colonies began. There were no colonies in the West. There were no colonies in the Midwest. So the South and East pretty much built um, Black American culture, foundation of Black American culture. So that's where those sounds and rock and roll, hip hop, they come from the church. They come from the old spirituals that slaves created during the time of despair during slavery, and they kind of made it and formulated these different types of music that we enjoy today, coming from the blues and the gospel. If you watch the movie Ray, you really see Ray kind of take those two things and kind of make that sound that he had created for himself. So Center starts off about two young men trying to find a way to recreate themselves when they return home from the South, because they've done a lot of things that are um, heinous. They've been in war. They worked for individuals in Chicago that, you know, were grimy. So they're trying to redeem themselves. Pretty much that's what the movie is about. Still trying to make money, trying to make a new living for themselves, but they try to redeem themselves. And you see them kind of putting the pieces together and getting those people around them that they feel can help them redeem, or they could exploit in a way, because they were still kind of lost in that mind state. So we see them kind of trying to rekindle old relationships, um, mend some relationships as they get the crew back together. And at the same time, we know dealing with these guys never turns out good for anybody as we hear the story. I mean, some things were just, death, loss of children, and them not really being able to relate to people because of their parental situation. And we saw a main character who's kind of torn between the church and what he wants. Back in the day, certain music was labeled as evil, this, that, and those. So he's kind of torn between the church and his faith and the love of music and him being able to enjoy his music, which is the blues. So, those things were put together masterfully by Ryan Coogler. And at the same time, we have the problem of the movie. And the problem of the movie is the vampire. And I've seen a lot of movies struggle with the vampire. So, if a movie's a vampire movie, it's a vampire movie. It's a build up. We get to meet the vampire. We get to learn some things about the vampire. So if you watch Nosferatu gives us the story of a vampire and his lust for this woman and pretty much how this lust for this woman kind of destroys him. That's the story of Nosferatu. He's evil and he wants love, but how's a devil gonna have love? His love is twisted. His idea of love is twisted, and we see that in Nosferatu, masterfully put together, very well directed. Another good one that I like, if you watch Interview with a Vampire, kind of see this journey of vampires together and their struggle to live for all eternity. I mean, it's a struggle to live forever. And Queen of the Dam, a lot of people don't like Queen of the Dam. I enjoy Queen of the Dam with Vampire Lestat. He kind of talks about his journey, how he was created, because we get his backstory in Queen of the Dam, and then how he wakes up again and he wants to be free. I'm a vampire and put all his business out there in the street. But vampires kind of live the secretive life. They fed and then they dipped out in the sun. They dipped out in the corner. We saw what this movie kind of was based on was the film Dusk Till Dawn. If you saw Dusk Till Dawn, they go into the bar, the sun drops and they're in Mexico and they get overran by a saloon full of vampires. It's a feeding room for people who come in and then they eat them and then they go on to the next night. So we see that. So we see some elements of that. The problem with Coogler's movie is a vampire movie, and it does not start off as a vampire movie because he's a good writer. So he's developing characters. He does a great, masterful job of developing these characters. He's got the music. We got some here, but he doesn't take the time to develop the vampire. So when we get to the vampire, he's just, hey, by the way, here's a vampire. We don't even know who this person is. And it's just like they're thrown on scene. There's no development. We don't know them. And boom. By the way, I'm a vampire. And then, I'm hunting down this kid because his music is powerful. And I know with his music and him with me, I can get other people to follow me. And it just didn't make any sense. So my biggest problem with Sinners is it stops making sense. That becomes a big issue with the movie. It just stops making sense. And the vampire is not developed. So with a vampire movie, you have to develop the vampire. We have to care about the vampire. We got to know something about the vampire. If you watch the movie Vampires with James Woods, it starts off fast, and then we get to know the vampire because the church has been lying to him about this vampire and how powerful he is. And we kind of get the backstory and why why he is so evil and so upset and why he's hunting James Wood again. So we got some backstory. And I think those things are needed, when you have these type of films. You have to develop every character. And Coogler just didn't develop one of the main characters, which was the vampire. He just, by the way, here's the vampire. I'm like, okay. And then we got some killing. Okay. But why is this guy doing this? How did he awaken? Where did he come from? Was there any myth about vampires in Mississippi? We had a person who was into the mystics, she didn't say anything about, there used to be stories of vampires out here. Nothing. So we get no backstory of how these vampires got to Mississippi. So you got to put that into that. It's got to be some lore, some myth, something that kind of ties these mystic beings into this area, stories that have been told. You can take it back to slavery. There were times where, or stories that were told of back in the day, slaves disappearing, stuff like that, tied in. The other problem with the vampires is they kill and the people just come back to life. That's not vampires. I mean, that's some Blackula stuff where everybody you kill turns into a vampire. And I think vampire movies improved over the years where they kind of remove that myth that just because I bite you, it means you're going to turn into a vampire. I think Interview with a Vampire does it masterfully where you get to make the choice if you want to live forever. It's just not, well, I bite you and you're going to live forever. That's like a 1960s and 70s vampire movie where you're just biting everybody and then they come back to life. I think vampire movies have matured. Even in Dust Till Dawn. Well, Dust Till Dawn kind of did that a little bit, but not a lot. So even Dust Till Dawn, if you got murdered, you just got murdered. But definitely watching those things of just because I bite you, you're a vampire. So we see everybody get bitten, everybody turns into a vampire, no choice, no nothing. It's not, kind of presented in a way of, it's not sold to the person. Do you want to live forever? I think it was one bite scene where the girl was just bit a little bit. We had two scenes like that, but for the most part, people were getting just ripped to shreds. So when you make a vampire movie, any horror movie, it's got to make sense. And I think most of these horror movies today, they just don't make sense. They throw some stuff at you, people get ate, they all come back to life. They don't make any sense. So Sinners, the build up was great. The vampire was horrible. And in my personal opinion, it destroyed the movie because the vampire was not a developed character. He just run around biting people. You throw in a little bit of, oh well, this is why he's doing it, and at that point it doesn't matter. I mean, it's just all over the place at that point. And then you ask him, well, what the fuck do these vampires want? So it's got to be developed. So great writer, Coogler, bad at horror movies. I hate to say it. He's just not. He doesn't have everything that's needed to make a good horror movie. Mr. Mahdi, Back Road Ministry. This is just my opinion of Sinners.